Okay, this is 7.RP.3, 7th grade, Ratios and Proportions, Standard 3, Video 5, Simple Interest, Part 1. All right, let's talk about some of the standard that we have already covered. And let's just highlight that. So if I were to read this middle portion of the standard, we know we have already talked about tax, markups and markdowns, gratuities, which is another name for a tip, and percent of increase and decrease. Today's focus is primarily on simple interest. So let's talk about this other part of the standard here. This is a very vocab heavy section today. Please copy these words down in your journal and define them. Purposes of today's lesson. By the end of the lesson, you will be able to explain how simple interest can be used in your everyday life, and you will also be able to rearrange a literal equation for a specified variable. And we're going to talk about that obviously throughout the next few slides here. Excuse me. Let's begin with a real world example. It says you deposit $750 into a savings account for 3 years. Your balance is $795 at the end of the 3 years. What is the simple annual interest rate? Okay, we're not going to solve this problem right now. What I'd like to do in the next few minutes is take this idea of simple interest and apply it to your everyday life. Maybe some of you right now have your own savings accounts. Maybe you know a little bit about your parents' savings accounts. And let me take you through that first. And then at the end of this lesson today, if we have time, we'll work this out together. All right, at home, you may have a piggy bank. You got a piggy bank in your bedroom there. And this thing, you know, what are you like, 11, 12, 13 years old right about now? Your piggy bank is overflowing with all of your birthday presents, or maybe you're getting something for the holidays, and you're worried about it. You're worried about it being in your home because you know, you might lose it. You know, you have nowhere to put it. The piggy, it's just laying out on your table. So let's take that money that right now is in the piggy bank. Let's take it out. Let's walk it over to this bank. Now there's many banks to choose from. You know, in your neighborhood, you want to always look around for some interest rates that are very high when it comes to using them to gather interest. You want to put this money, this principal amount that you're giving to the bank to good use so that you are able to take out an amount of money back home. And I'm going to explain that in a minute too. So here you are, you walk into the bank and you take your big bag of money. Here it is. And you give it to the bank. You put it in there for safekeeping. Now, a lot of people in the neighborhood are doing the same thing that you are. All of their piggy banks are growing too big. So they're putting their money into the bank also. Now, here's what the bank says. Thank you. I'm going to take all of that money that these neighborhood people are giving to me, and I am going to use it. Yes, when you give your money to the bank uses it. And how might they use it? Well, people like to borrow money sometimes. When you have a large expense in your life, such as college or buying a car, you are going to have to borrow that money. And the bank is there for you. So when you borrow this large sum of money to go to college, the bank says, here you go. In a few years, I'd like you to give me that money back. And on top of that, unfortunately, we have to give a percentage of that money in addition to the principal amount, the amount that we borrowed. Okay, so when college is done, you got some time to go ahead and you get yourself a job and you make that money back so that you can give that large bag of money back to the bank, and then here comes that rate of money that you also have to give on top of the money that you borrow. That's the interest. Okay, another example might be you're looking to buy a car. Some of you are going to get a license in a few years and you need to buy a car. So the bank says, all right, here you go. Here's a sum of money and you can use it to buy that car, but we're going to charge you a rate. We're going to charge you a percentage to borrow the money. It's on a loan. All right, after a certain amount of time, we give the money back to the bank, and in addition to that, we have to give them this interest also. Now, where do we go from that? We let the bank borrow our money so that they can give out loans. The bank charged all of these people a percent rate, and it's all sitting back in there. And I now am ready to take all of I'm grown up, I'm ready to take all of my money out of the bank so I can go buy something special for myself. Well, the bank gives you a little thank you card. They say, hey, thanks for letting us borrow your money, and here's a little thank you gift. So here's that percentage that they give us as a little gift. Thank you very much for your business. Now you walk out of the house and you go back home and you have this principal amount that you put in, you deposited, and this extra interest money. Well, when you have these two bags of money, you have the principal amount and the interest, that little baggie there. When you put them together, you add them up. This is called the balance. All right. Here is the equation used for finding the simple interest. Now each letter is representative of an idea. So I is the interest, and that's the amount that you are earning. The P is the principal. That's the amount that we put into the bank, or the amount from those people that need to borrow the money. That's your starting amount. R is the percentage, and we've talked a lot about what percentages are. And then time in months or years is represented by the T. And we've already talked about what the balance is down here. That's the interest added to the principal. All right, let's switch gears here. We've talked a little bit about simple interest. In order for us to solve these lengthy word problems, these real world examples, we need to know how to rearrange this equation of I equals PRT. All right, what does this look like? This is another one of the goals of the lesson, or the purposes of the lesson. We need to rearrange this equation in 4 different ways. Now, you only see 3 equations kind of set up there, but the 4th one is the actual original one. In this one, we have the I isolated by itself. So the I is by itself, which means we need to know what the principal, rate, and time is. We can multiply them all together and it kind of spits out this interest answer. Well, the other 3 ways, sometimes we don't want to find the interest. We don't want to isolate it by itself. So our job is to solve for one of the other 3 letters that might be missing in our problem. We don't know what it is. So let's just say in the first one, we are going to solve for the principal, the P. Okay, I'll put that in a little, how about some quotation marks there. So if P is the letter in question and I need to isolate it, that means I want to get this R and T over to the other side of this equal sign. Well, we've talked a little bit about inverse operations. If all of the letters are touching each other, they're all being multiplied. So the inverse operation of multiplying is dividing. So in order for us to get the R and the T over to the left, we are going to divide both sides by the R and the T. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do the other side of this equal sign. All right, so what's going to happen there? What happens there is that the R and the T in the numerator will cancel with the R and the T in the denominator, and that leaves us with the principal equaling whatever the interest is, whatever that number of the interest that they give us, divided by the rate multiplied by the time. So when I do this division, the order of operations here, if I do my math correctly, I'm going to find out what that amount was that I borrowed or the amount that I deposited. Okay, the third one, remember we have one way I is solved for, P has been solved for. Maybe we want to solve for the rate. Okay, same idea. This is all multiplication. R is the letter in question. And that means we need to get the P and the T out of there, over to the other side. Okay, so we are going to do the opposite of multiplying. We divide both sides by the variables that we don't need anymore. We need to get rid of them. So we'll divide by the P multiplied by the T on both sides. All right, what are we left with? Well, if we did our cancellations, the P's and the T's would cancel in my numerator and denominator. I would be left with the rate equaling whatever the interest is divided by the principal times the time. All right, I would like you to pause the video and solve the last literal equation for the variable t. Okay, we are back. So if I'm solving for t, I see this being multiplied by this p and the r. That means I need to get rid of the p and the r. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. Let's look at our cancellations. The p's cancel, the r's cancel. I have just isolated t, the time by itself, and the time is going to be equal to the interest divided by the principal times the rate. Okay, that is solving literal equations for specified variables. All right, let's go back to that original problem that we began with and see if we can solve this thing using our simple interest equation, I equals PRT. I always like to start with the equation on the board, and then I'm going to fill in the information that I know right underneath it. So the interest, all right, so we deposit $750 into an account. 3 years, well, I know 3 years is my time, so why don't I just put that in right underneath there. The principal amount is what I deposited, so I deposited 750, so that would be my principal amount. And it looks like they give me the interest also. Now the interest is the amount that was added on to my principal. Well, if I went from 750 to 795, that was my balance, which means I must have added my interest and my principal, which looks to be like, okay, let's come off to the side. If I have 795 balance and I started with $750, that interest was $45. Now who's missing? Well, it looks like in the question we're missing the rate. So the R is the missing variable. And now we are going to go and do our math, okay? So we have 45 equaling 750 multiplied by 3 multiplied by R. According to the order of operations, I can do my multiplication here first. So let's come off to the side again. We have 750 multiplied by 3, which is 2,250 multiplied by R. And if I'm solving for R, it's touching the 2250, so that's multiplication. The inverse of that we have learned is division. So let's divide both sides by 2,250. And looks like we're going to have some long division here. We've done that. No calculator. We don't need a calculator. So we have a cancellation in the top and the bottom. My R is going to equal whatever this answer is, and then we're going to have to turn it into a percentage because a rate is a percentage. All right, let's get a different color. And we are going to divide. So it's the top divided by the bottom. So we're going to have, looks like we ran out of room here. So I'm going to erase some of this. And we can erase this now. Let's drag this over here. All right. So we have 45 divided by 2250. Well, 2250 can't go into 4, and it cannot go into 5. So we've run out of numbers, so we can add a decimal, bring it up. Okay, so it goes in 0 times here. Now, if I were to add another 0, can 2250 go into 450? Well, it goes, no, 0 times. So now we can add another 0. And 2250 can definitely go into 4,500 at least one time. Let's try out 2 times. I think it's going to be pretty close. All right, 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 5 is 10. Carry the 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 2 times 2 is 4. Subtract, and it looks like we have no remainder, which means my R is a decimal of 0.02, also read as 200ths. And we know that percentage is based on 100, so it's 2 per 100, also known as 2%. Or if you wanted to take this decimal and multiply the decimal number by 100, that would have moved it twice to the right, and you add your percent sign. So the rate, R, is equal to 2%. And that is what the bank gave you in terms of the rate. Okay, in your journal, I'd like you to define the given terms on page 2 of the flip chart. Write a few sentences on what you learned from this video. I'd like you to create a real-world example of your own, and we're going to be putting that on our upcoming assessment. So try to figure out some numbers that you can put in there. Check it, make sure that it works. If you're having trouble, if you're coming up with a bunch of random crazy decimals, bring that to class and I can help you tidy that up. We'll throw one of those on a quiz, and In addition, I'd like you to have a discussion with an adult based on what you know about simple interest. Why don't you go tell them what you know, and maybe they can give you some insight on some of the things that they've come across in their life when it comes to interest rates. Okay, I'll see you in class.